My cousin took my bedroom, my mug, and my hoodie. My mom said I'd come around. At dinner, they set the table for everyone but me. No plate, no chair. So I served them all eviction notices instead. They say home is where the heart is, but I think sometimes it's where old guilt comes to live. My name is Jordan. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Monterey, California. A couple years ago, I bought a seaside house after selling my first startup, a small but clean break. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. I worked for it. I earned it. But now it feels like I'm just a guest in my own home. Is this where we'll be sleeping? My mom asked, walking into the guest room like she already owned it. I mean, the bed looks a little firm, but we'll manage. That was day one. No warm thank you. No talk about the arrangement. Just assume permanence. I'd let my parents move in because my dad's pension barely covered their condo rent, and mom had been hinting about downsizing stress since last Christmas. They didn't ask. Not really. One day, mom said, it's probably time for us to be near family again. The next, they showed up with boxes and a U-Haul, like it had all been settled in a boardroom I wasn't invited to. I stood there in the hallway, still holding my coffee, trying to remember when I'd agreed to this. Mom looked around, hands on hips, like a home inspector. Not bad, huh? I always knew you'd do well. After all, you come from strong stock. I nodded, my mouth tight. And anyway, she added with a half smile, we raised you. Now it's your turn. That line. That damned line. She used it whenever she wanted something guilt served on a silver platter. Dad didn't say much. He never did. He just shuffled past with a box labeled wine glasses and mumbled, don't worry, we won't get in the way. He said it the way people say, just one more drink, knowing it's never true. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, hearing every creak of the floorboards, every soft hum of my mom's sleep meditation video echoing through the wall. I closed my eyes and thought about Casey. Casey is my cousin, technically second cousin, but we grew up like siblings. If siblings meant I constantly got the short end of the stick. When I was 8, I wanted to take ballet. Casey wanted to take karate. My mom said ballet was too expensive for something so temporary. A week later, Casey got a full uniform and signed up for classes 3 towns over. I watched from the backseat, still in my school clothes, as he punched the air, and my parents clapped. At 13, I had a shot at joining a summer coding camp. I was so excited. It was competitive for girls in tech. But then Casey got in trouble at school and his mom needed a break, so I stayed home to babysit while he got sent off to some art camp to channel his emotions. I didn't fight it. I never did. The unspoken rule in our family was, keep the peace, keep everyone happy, don't make waves. So I let my dreams shift, shrink, rearrange themselves around other people's problems. That habit followed me into adulthood. And now, here we were. My retired parents had moved into the house I worked my ass off to afford. I paid the bills. I stocked the fridge. I handled the plumbing when it broke and the power when it blinked out after a storm. But somehow, they made it sound like this was a family investment, like they were co-stewards of my home. The next morning, Mom stood in the kitchen, buttering toast like she lived there forever. You'll see, she said brightly. This is going to be so good for you, having us here. I mean, no more lonely dinners. No more talking to that Alexa thing. I stared at her. I don't talk to Alexa. She gave me a wink. Sure you don't. Later that week, she called my aunt, speakerphone, of course, and said, we made the decision together. Jordan was so happy we'd be nearby. She insisted. I almost dropped my phone. Insisted? I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed it, like always. Because deep down, some part of me still believed that if I didn't cause trouble, if I just did what they expected, they'd love me more, respect me more. But that's not how it works. When I was a kid, keeping everyone happy felt like the price of peace. As an adult, it just feels like losing myself in a house full of other people's expectations. It was a Tuesday morning when my mom dropped the bomb, right after pouring her second cup of coffee like it was just another update on the weather. Oh, by the way, she said, her voice light, Casey and Greg will be staying with us for a little while. I blinked at her. What? She took a sip, not meeting my eyes. Just until they get on their feet. You know how it is. Hard times, pandemic recovery, blah blah. No, I said slowly, setting down my fork. I don't know how it is. What do you mean staying with us? She waved it off like it was nothing. Don't be dramatic, Jordan. It's family. They just need a place to crash. Casey's been trying to focus on his screenwriting again. Greg's podcast is picking up steam. This is the right environment for creative growth. Creative growth? My house wasn't a retreat center. I wanted to argue, to say something, anything. But my tongue felt heavy in my mouth, like it didn't know how to form words anymore. I glanced at Dad, who was buttering toast like he hadn't heard a word. Wait, I tried again. They're moving in, just for a bit, Mom said breezily. Until they find something more permanent. Maybe a few months. They're bringing a few things. A few things turned out to be 3 full suitcases, a box labeled Greg's studio gear, and a small dog named Cyrus that neither of them mentioned until the moment they arrived. Greg walked in like he was checking into a hotel. Aviator sunglasses still on. Even though it was nearly 6 p.m., love what you've done with the place, he said, spinning slowly in the foyer like he was reviewing a real estate listing. The lighting in here is insane. Might be good for filming. Casey followed behind, already texting on her phone. Where should we put our stuff? Upstairs or guest room? I said, forcing a smile so tight it felt like my cheeks would crack. That's all there is. Oh, she said, wrinkling her nose. Is that the one with the twin beds? It's a queen, I muttered. Greg dropped his duffel bag with a loud thud. Sweet. I'll need a place to set up my mic stand and soundboard. Hope the walls aren't too thin. Hope the walls are thin, I thought bitterly. Maybe then you'll hear me scream into a pillow at 2 a.m. They moved in like they'd lived there for years, taking over the living room couch, hogging the coffee machine, leaving temporary grocery bags in the hallway. Greg asked me to buy oat milk. Casey accidentally used my towel after a shower. And Cyrus, the little dog, barked at everything that moved, including my own reflection in the sliding glass door. I told myself it was fine. Temporary. A favor. I could handle it. Mom caught me sulking in the kitchen one evening and said, "Family steps up." It was her mantra. She used it like duct tape, slapping it over any situation that didn't benefit her. I repeated it to myself later while refilling the Brita because Greg had finished the last drop and left the empty container in the fridge like a toddler. Family steps up. I whispered it like a prayer when I found my good throw blanket crumpled on the porch, soaked from Cyrus's accident. Family steps up. It didn't help. Casey and Greg made themselves comfortable fast. Too fast. They had dinner with my parents every night. Never asked if I'd be home. Never offered to cook. One night, I came in late from the office, and they were using the big TV to watch a live podcast stream of Greg playing chess with his friend in Canada. "This is our routine," Casey said, like I was interrupting them. I went upstairs and closed my bedroom door, even though the walls did nothing to muffle Greg's voice yelling, "Rook to E4," like he was announcing a fire drill. The weirdest part? My mom kept acting like all of this was normal, like this was how families work, like they hadn't just dropped 2 full-grown dependents into my life without asking. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, remembering the time Casey wanted to cut her hair short in high school. Her mom said no, but somehow I ended up in trouble for encouraging rebellion, even though I hadn't said a word. I remembered when Casey failed her sophomore year and came to live with us for structure, which meant I got kicked out of my room and spent 6 months sleeping on the couch. I'd let it happen. Back then, I thought saying no would make me selfish. Now I wasn't so sure, because this wasn't just about Casey and Greg taking up space. It was about every old pattern climbing out of the past and sitting on my chest like it paid rent. I thought this house would finally be mine. Now I was just the landlord, and apparently the maid, too. It was a Thursday night when the conversation happened, the kind of night that felt like a setup from the start. Dinner was over, plates still scattered on the counter, and I was halfway through cleaning when Casey leaned against the kitchen island like she had something to announce. "Hey," she said, way too casually. "Can we talk about the upstairs layout?" I looked at her, suspicious already. "What about it?" Greg strolled in behind her, arms crossed, sipping some herbal tea he'd labeled with a sticky note. Greg's blend. Do not touch. He looked way too smug for someone not paying rent. Casey kept smiling. "It's just, Greg and I have been thinking, since I'm starting my creative sabbatical soon and Greg's podcast is gaining traction, we kind of need more functional space." I wiped my hands on a towel and narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean, functional space?" "You know," Greg jumped in, like this was a team presentation. "A quiet room, better acoustics. The guest room's nice, but it's small. No closet space. And the Wi-Fi's spotty over there." Casey nodded eagerly. "Plus, the primary bedroom has that huge walk-in closet. I could use that as a costume rack for my scene work. And the bathroom? It has natural light, perfect for content." I stared at them, blinking like an idiot. "You're talking about my room?" Casey laughed like I was being precious. "Not forever, just while we're here. You're barely in there anyway. You work all the time. We'd actually be using the space." Greg added, "Yeah, no offense, but you've always had kind of a corporate vibe. You might not get what we're doing, but it's important. We're building something." I said nothing at first. My hands were clenched around the towel. I could feel the fabric digging into my palms. For a second, I was 13 again, being told I couldn't do the art program because Casey needed more help with her SAT prep. I was 17 again, giving up prom because no one could drive me and Casey had a family emergency that somehow meant I needed to stay home. "You want me to give you my bedroom?" I said slowly, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding. "It's not a big deal," Casey replied. "You have that other guest room. Just swap." "Easy, easy," I echoed. "Come on, Jordan," she said, walking over like she was trying to reason with a child. "We're family. You're not using the space to its full potential. Don't you want to help us succeed?" I looked at her, her fresh manicure, her perfect waves of hair, her smug little half smile like this was all inevitable. And for once, something inside me cracked. "No," I said, just one word. She blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated, louder this time. "You're not getting my bedroom." Greg let out a soft scoff. "Wow." Casey's smile dropped, and suddenly she looked offended, like I'd broken some kind of sacred pact. "You don't have to get mean about it. I'm trying to do something serious with my career." "So am I," I said, my voice sharper now. "I run a company, Casey. I'm not going to downgrade myself in my own home so you can podcast in my bathroom." Greg rolled his eyes. That's the problem with tech people. You think everything's about productivity. Some of us are trying to create art. My jaw tightened. Then do it in the room you were given. Or outside. Or a studio. Not in my room. Casey crossed her arms. You're being selfish. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous. Selfish? For keeping the bedroom in my own house. Her voice rose. You said you wanted us to feel comfortable here. Now you're acting like a gatekeeper. What happened to family stepping up? There it was. The phrase. Like a knife pulled from an old drawer. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out of the kitchen, towel still in hand, fingers shaking. Upstairs, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, heart thudding in my chest. The walls, the ones they wanted so badly, felt like they were shrinking. I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, trying to breathe through the noise in my head. I couldn't remember the last time I said no without apologizing for it. It felt foreign, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit, but I meant it. For the first time in years, I had said no, and I wasn't going to back down. I came home early on a Friday, hoping for a quiet hour to myself. I hadn't told anyone I was leaving work early. I just needed one afternoon without meetings, without performative gratitude, without Casey's voice echoing through the walls. As I walked into the house, something felt off. It was too quiet. No Greg yelling into his microphone. No Cyrus barking. No mom humming to herself in the kitchen. Just this thick, eerie stillness. I headed upstairs, already feeling my stomach twist. I didn't know why. Just a gut instinct. That slow, creeping dread you get before the other shoe drops. And then I saw it. My bedroom door was open. Inside, the bedspread was different. The navy quilt I'd had for years gone, replaced by some chunky beige throw that looked like it belonged in a rental cabin. My nightstand lamp had been moved. My framed photo of me and my co-founders gone. In its place, a crystal vase with fake eucalyptus stems and one of Greg's ring lights glowing in the corner. At the foot of the bed, 2 half-unpacked suitcases. My closet door hung open, half filled with Casey's vintage coats and Greg's podcast gear. My bookshelf was half empty. My books were stacked in a plastic bin on the floor. My clothes, my life, moved. I stood there in the doorway, frozen, like my brain was still buffering. That's when Casey walked in, wearing one of my hoodies like it belonged to her. She was holding a mug that definitely was mine, the one from the Dublin Tech conference I'd spoken at, the one I never let anyone use. Oh, she said, startled. You're home early. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice low and tight. She blinked, like she didn't understand the question. We were just getting a head start. You know, since we talked about the switch. No, I said, stepping into the room. We didn't talk about anything. I said no. She smiled, like I was the one being irrational. Aunt May said it's okay. She said you'd come around. Aunt May, my mother. I could feel heat rushing to my face. My hands curled into fists at my sides. You moved my stuff without asking me. We didn't want to bother you, she said quickly. You're always so busy. And you said no, but I could tell you didn't mean it. I stared at her, trying to understand how someone could say something so shameless with a straight face. Greg popped in a second later, earbuds hanging around his neck. Oh hey, we just rearranged a bit. I hope you're cool with the tapestry. I needed something with a neutral background for recording. I'm not cool with any of this, I snapped. Casey set the mug down on my dresser, her dresser, now, apparently, and crossed her arms. You're blowing this out of proportion. We're family. It's not like we stole anything. You're in my room. You're acting like you sleep in here every night. Don't you fall asleep on the couch half the time? I didn't answer. My voice felt trapped in my throat. I turned and walked out of the room, down the stairs, past the kitchen, where Mom sat at the table like she was waiting for me. She looked up with that practiced calm, the one she used when trying to convince me a bad situation was actually my fault. I told them it would be fine, she said, sipping her tea. They needed the space. You're always saying how little you use that room anyway. You didn't ask me. She shrugged. It's a big house. You'll adjust. I stared at her. You really think this is okay? I think, she said coolly, that you've forgotten what it means to be part of a family. Everyone sacrifices sometimes. No, I said. What I've forgotten is how good you are at making me feel like I'm the selfish one for having boundaries. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding. You knew I said no. Jordan, don't be dramatic. That's not an answer. She set her cup down harder than she meant to. You've always needed things to be your way. You're so used to control, you don't know how to make room for other people. I laughed, bitter, shaky. You really believe that, don't you? That me asking to keep my own bedroom is some kind of power trip. She didn't answer, and I realized she didn't have to. This had never been about fairness. It was about convenience. I had made life easy for her, for Casey, for Greg, and now that I wasn't cooperating, I was the problem. I went back upstairs, my old room, the guest room now, had my things stuffed in a corner like someone had boxed up a tenant. I sat on the bed, staring at the wall. For the first time in years, I let myself admit the truth. They didn't respect me. Not as a daughter, not as a cousin, not even as a homeowner. They saw me as a resource, and I was done being useful at the cost of my dignity. That night, I came downstairs at 7 like I always did. I wasn't hungry, not really, but I figured I'd at least sit down, make an appearance, pretend, for one more night, that things hadn't completely unraveled. The smell hit me first. garlic, herbs, something baked. My mom's lasagna, the one she only made for special occasions. I remember thinking, since when is a Friday night special? And then I walked into the dining room. The table was full, plates already set, wine glasses half filled, napkins folded into those little triangles she always insisted made things feel civilized. Casey and Greg sat on one side, smiling like this was a magazine shoot. My dad was at the end, halfway through his second beer. Even Cyrus had a spot under the table, chewing a sock. What didn't have a spot? Me. There was no seat for me, no place setting, not even a fork. Hey, I said, standing in the doorway. Did you guys start early? Mom looked up, unfazed. We didn't think you were coming. I always eat around now. Well, she said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. We figured with the tension lately, maybe it was best if you had some space. Casey didn't look up. Greg just took a bite of bread. I stood there, heartbeat crawling into my throat. There was food, plenty of it, but they hadn't made a plate. They hadn't even offered. Just left me out. Symbolic. Deliberate. Are you serious? I asked, more to the room than to any of them. Greg let out a small, forced laugh. It's not personal. We just didn't want to create more awkwardness. Casey added, honestly, with everything that's going on, we thought it might be better if we had a little family dinner. I turned to her, slowly. Family. She shrugged. You seemed like you didn't want to be involved anymore. My mom picked up her glass. If you don't want to share the house, she said, voice light but cutting, why share the meal? The words hung there. Heavy. Ugly. That was the moment it stopped being about rooms or towels or Wi-Fi. It was about power. It was about sending a message that I was outnumbered, that if I didn't play along, I'd be cut out. I felt it. That old childhood reflex. The urge to smooth things over, laugh it off, pretend I wasn't hurt, to sit down at the table anyway, make a joke, swallow the humiliation like a pill. But I didn't. I turned around and walked straight to my office. I closed the door, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second, and then I started typing. How to file a formal eviction notice in California. It was petty, maybe, but it was also necessary. They'd taken my room, my boundaries. Now they were working on my place at the table. And if I let this go, there'd be nothing left of me in my own home. I stayed up for 2 more hours reading rental laws, homeowner rights, tenant definitions. Turns out, it didn't matter that no one was paying rent. If someone had stayed more than 30 days, boom, legally a tenant. I could still serve a 30-day notice. I just had to do it by the book. I bookmarked the PDF template, saved a copy, labeled the folder, house, final. Upstairs, I heard laughter. Casey's fake high-pitched giggle. My mom clinking a glass. They didn't know I was done, but they would, and soon. I didn't say a word that whole weekend. Not when my mom asked if I was feeling better. Not when Greg tried to compliment my espresso machine like it would smooth things over. Not when Casey left her yoga mat in the middle of the hallway for the 3rd day in a row. I was done talking. By Monday morning, I had printed the eviction notices. 4 copies, 1 for each of them, folded neatly, legally worded, no room for debate. That afternoon, I waited until everyone was in the living room. Greg had his laptop out, one of his many editing days. Casey was doing some kind of breathwork exercise on the rug. My mom sat nearby, knitting something she'd probably never finish. My dad was in his usual spot by the window, pretending to read the newspaper while quietly disappearing from the conflict. I walked in without a sound. They looked up, mildly curious. I handed the papers out, one by one. No explanation. Greg opened his first. His eyes skimmed the top line, then widened. Wait, what is this? 30-day notice, I said calmly. You all need to vacate the house by the 1st. Casey's mouth dropped open. You're kidding. No. She held the paper like it was burning her fingers. You're evicting us? I nodded once. But she turned to our mom like she was waiting for backup. You can't let her do this. Mom didn't even blink. She's just angry. We'll talk about it later. No, I said, my voice sharp but steady. We won't. This isn't a discussion. This is a formal notice. Greg stood up now. Are you out of your mind? This is illegal. You can't just throw people out. I absolutely can, I replied. You've been living here over 30 days. Legally, that makes you tenants. I've filed the paperwork. You're unbelievable, he muttered. You're actually throwing out your own family. Casey's voice cracked. We don't have anywhere to go. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No guilt, no old urge to fix or soften. That's not my problem anymore, I said. You're being heartless, she snapped, voice rising. No, I said, stepping forward, calm and clear. I'm being honest. I've let you walk all over me. I gave you a place to stay. I let you make demands. I let you steal my room, my space, my peace. And you acted like it was your right. Greg laughed under his breath. You just love control, don't you? No, I said again. I love boundaries. And this, I held up the last copy of the notice, waving it slightly, is mine. My mom finally stood up. Slow, careful. Her eyes were hard now, the warmth gone. We raised you. Don't you think you owe us more than this? There it was. The dagger. She didn't even try to dress it up this time. I turned to face her fully. You raised me, I said. Yes, but what you taught me was that being good meant being quiet. That loving family meant letting myself be erased. That saying no made me selfish. She crossed her arms. And now what? You're better than us. I'm not better, I said. I'm just done. Dad spoke then, softly, without looking up. You're making a mistake, Jordan. I didn't even turn his way. No, I'm finally correcting one. Casey dropped her notice onto the coffee table like she couldn't bear to hold it another second. We're your family. You're supposed to help. I stepped back. I did help. I gave you my home. I gave you time. I gave you silence. What I didn't give was permission to take everything. Greg looked like he wanted to keep arguing, but the energy was shifting now. Even he could feel it, the wall I had finally built. Casey wiped her eyes. So that's it. That's it. You'll regret this, she said bitterly. I shook my head. I already regret not doing it sooner. I left them there, in the living room, with their papers and their stunned faces. Upstairs, in my reclaimed guest room turned bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I felt quiet, and that, I realized, was worth everything. The next morning, I made coffee like usual. Same mug, same creaky cabinet, but something felt different, lighter. Down the hall, I heard the low murmur of voices, urgent, hushed, like they were trying not to let me hear them panic. I didn't care. I sipped my coffee and stared out the kitchen window, watching the ocean roll in and out like it didn't give a damn either. By noon, Greg finally appeared in the doorway. Can we talk? I set my mug down, turned, and nodded once. Sure. He stepped in, trying for calm, but already jittery. Look, I overreacted yesterday. I said nothing, just watched him sweat. He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. This doesn't have to get ugly. We can figure something out. We already did, I said. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. 30 days isn't enough time. Casey's freaking out. We're looking at short-term rentals, but they're expensive. Not my problem, I said, repeating it like a mantra now. He swallowed hard. Okay, then what is the problem? Because this feels personal. It is, I replied. You moved into my home and tried to take over. You treated me like a doormat and called me selfish when I said no. And instead of apologizing, you played the victim. You think that's not personal? He shifted on his feet, clearly not expecting me to stay so calm. We just need more time. I crossed my arms. You have options. You can stay until the end of the 30 days, in the guest room, respectfully, or you can leave now. But the master bedroom is off limits. Permanently. He looked like he wanted to argue, like his mouth was full of comebacks. But all he said was, seriously? Seriously, I said. You can stay under my roof, or you can go. But if you stay, you follow my rules. There was a long silence between us. Then he nodded slowly. I'll talk to Casey. Good, I said. He turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. You know, you didn't have to go nuclear. I looked him straight in the eye. You didn't have to force me to. An hour later, I heard the sounds of drawers opening, closet doors slamming, the low thump of suitcases being dragged across hardwood. Casey didn't say a word to me. She didn't even look up as they brought their things downstairs. By early evening, they were gone. No dramatic exit. No apology. Just the hollow sound of the front door clicking shut. I stood in the hallway after they left, hands loose at my sides. The house suddenly too quiet. My mom walked past me without a word, her mouth drawn in a tight line. My dad kept reading his newspaper like the past 2 days hadn't happened. I didn't speak to either of them that night. I just sat in the master bedroom, my bedroom again, and breathed. No more Greg's ring light. No more Casey's boho pillows. No more mug swaps, towel sharing, passive-aggressive post-its on the fridge. For once, the room felt like mine again. Not because of the bed or the closet or the view, because I took it back. The house was finally quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that makes you nervous. Not the pause before the storm kind. This was something else. Still, steady, like the walls were exhaling with me. No voices echoing from the living room. No Greg's podcast rambling through the floorboards. No Casey clomping around barefoot and entitled. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the distant rhythm of the waves outside. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. I made dinner for myself. Simple, pasta, salad, a glass of wine. No seat stolen, no place setting missing. I didn't have to ask permission to exist in my own home. My parents stayed quiet that evening. Dad sat on the porch, pretending to read. I knew he wouldn't say anything. That was his skill, disappearing without moving. He didn't pick sides. He just let things happen. And honestly, I wasn't expecting much more from him now. Mom stayed in her room until after dark. When she finally came into the kitchen, I was loading the dishwasher. She didn't start with small talk. No tea in hand, no softened tone. Just walked up and said, things got out of hand. I paused, let the silence sit between us for a moment. Then I straightened up and faced her. Yeah, they did. She exhaled through her nose, eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't think it would go that far. I thought we could manage, all of us under one roof. You didn't ask me, I said, calm, not bitter. You just decided. She nodded, slowly. I guess I did. Another silence. This one felt different. Less like a battle, more like a bridge being considered. Not yet built. I never wanted to make you feel used, she said. We needed help. I wasn't thinking about how that would land. I folded my arms. It didn't just land. It crushed. She looked up at me then. Really looked. You're right, she said. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. No tears. No over-the-top performance. Just those 2 words. I didn't forgive her right away, but I let the apology sit. I let it breathe. I'm willing to help, I said after a minute. But not like this. Not at the cost of being disrespected. Not with the guilt trips. not with people moving in behind my back. This house is mine. If we're going to share it, we do it on equal footing. That means mutual respect. She nodded again, slower this time. Okay. I didn't expect that to fix everything. I didn't even expect her to fully get it, but it was a start, and that was more than I'd had in years. That night, I went to bed in my own room, under my own blanket, surrounded by the little details that made it mine again. The photo of me and my co-founders back on the shelf, my navy quilt neatly tucked, my books back in order. I lay there in the dark and listened to the waves outside, the slow breath of the ocean rolling in and out like clockwork. For the first time in a long time, I slept deeply. No clenched jaw, no noise from the hallway, no tightness in my chest wondering who was going to cross a line next. Just peace, earned, not gifted. And in the morning, when I opened the blinds and felt the sun hit my face, I didn't feel like a visitor anymore. I was home.